This is our second Leading the Charge electric school bus webinar. Our first one was on November 30th, and we kind of were able to go over the different, all of the different programs that were available, along with speaking from some amazing experts tonight. So we have a wonderful kind of crew. So I'm just going to kind of get things started. My name is Sunita Vanderloo. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am MN350's Clean Transportation Organizer. So I will be facilitating along with speaking just a little bit at this event, but we're really going to be amplifying some amazing voices tonight. So just to kind of give people an idea of what to expect, I'm just going to over the welcome. We're going to run through kind of what to expect in housekeeping. Then I will speak very briefly on kind of what the current federal funding that is available in Minnesota. And then I will pass it off to Highland Fleets to speak about their work with Red Lake, Minnesota, and then to Doug Francis, who has a wonderful, marvelous experiences at Gaylord School, which is in farther northern Michigan, which is a rural school district. And then Dr. Daniel Trujano will wrap us up with the health impacts of diesel buses and the positives for switching to fully electric. And then we will thank speakers, and we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So I will get us rolling. Again, these are our speakers in the order that you will see them. And then just for Zoom etiquette, please mute yourself upon entering this call, just so then we can hear everybody available. And also, if you have a question throughout any of the speakers' presentations, feel free to throw it in the chat. And then that way I'll make sure that we can capture them all for the Q&A portion of the presentation. Additionally, if you need closed captions on your menu at the bottom, there should be an option that says CC, and that will give you closed captions. All right, so I think I've been able to cover everything. And now I'm going to kind of, okay, there we go. Throw us into really briefly kind of why clean school buses. This PowerPoint has our slideshows from the Environmental Protection Agency. That is what the EPA stands for. That's a little shortened version. And our speakers today will go into much greater detail on kind of why, but I just wanted to give everyone a quick primer for kind of some of the reasons why we want our students and our school districts to switch. One is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The clean school buses emit zero or low tailpipe emissions. They provide cleaner air for the school districts and the communities surrounding them. There's also cost savings additionally to replace older diesel school buses with clean school buses that often reduces the maintenance and fuel costs, also resiliency. And then Dan's going to talk more on kind of how it specifically impacts students. And also additionally, you'll see on the screen, there's a lot of CSB. That stands for Clean School Bus. So if you see that anywhere else, that's kind of what that acronym means as well. So I'm just going to go over really quick on a really exciting opportunity that is open right now for school districts, and that is through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The acronym for that is IIJA. I always tell people in this work, but it's just a bunch of acronyms. And so this was passed by the Biden administration back in 2021, and this was seen as the biggest climate action that has been taken at a federal level. So that was very exciting. So through this law, the Biden administration allocated $5 billion to be spent over 5 fiscal years to replace existing school buses with clean electric school buses. And so they allocated this money to be deployed out through the Environmental Protection Agency. So the EPA was given this $5 billion to spend over 5 fiscal years. The fiscal years run from 22, so that means last year, all the way until 2026. And they have 2 different types of funding that is available. One is through the rebate program, which is open right now, and I will speak a little bit more to in a second. And then the second is the grant program. So they have 2 programs running, they never run at the same time. They alternate. So the grant program was open during the summer. And then now we are in the second round of the rebate program. We've already had one in 2022. So to really kind of go quickly over what goes into the rebate program this year. So the EPA, this is an expected number, but usually they're pretty solid with them. The EPA is offering at least 500 million for clean school buses and zero emission. That is what the ZE stands for, buses. So that basically means that people are allowed to replace existing internal combustion engine school buses with electric, propane, or compressed natural gas. Electric is the most sustainable and clean way to do this. And so that's what we're going to be pushing for today. And additionally, I'm going to go into this a little bit more, but the EPA also prioritizes applications. So when the Biden administration passed the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, they also passed the Justice 40 initiative, which basically is making it so all of the funds that were passed through this law, and there's a lot, all of them, at least 40% of each program's funds are allocated to communities that are either facing environmental justice or health injustice disparities or low-income communities. So making sure that that is prioritized, and how the EPA is following that initiative is that they will prioritize applications that come in from high-need local education agencies, tribal school districts that are funded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or students that are living on tribal land or rural areas. So that's a few kind of just breakdowns of what this program is currently having. The program dropped in September, I think it was September 28th, and the rebate program is open only until January 31st, which maybe feels far away, but it is creeping up behind us. And so that's kind of why we're having everyone speak today. So to go over a little bit what I had mentioned before about the difference between the Clean School Bus rebates versus the Clean School Bus grants, is that the rebate is a quick and simple application process. This is all done through the EPA's portal. Meanwhile, the grants are longer, they are more detailed, and they are submitted through grants.gov, which is a government-owned website. And the selection process for the rebates is a random number generated process. So it's a lottery process. So therefore, the more Minnesota names that we get kind of thrown into the bingo ball of electric school buses, the more likely we're going to get picked. This was a problem that we had last year, where not many Minnesota's names got put into the lottery for the rebate program in 2022. Therefore, we did not get selected for a lot. Meanwhile, the grant program there's not a lottery program for this. The EPA looks at every single grant application, and there's separate scoring for each kind of application, and they're individually selected. Also because the grants are, asking for a larger pot of money, and also because it's a grant, there's more very specific, uses for the money versus the rebate, it's a bit more flexible. So again, kind of like what I broke down with the prioritization criteria, there is one big difference that I would love to make, and I will keep stating it over and over again, is that there is right up here the discussion I talked about already with the high need school districts. So that means that school districts listed in the small area income and poverty estimates, which the acronym for that is SAPE. And so those are school district estimates for 2021 as having 20% or more students living in poverty. But additionally, Title I public school districts and charter school districts that are not listed already in this 20 percentile cutoff, such as Minneapolis public schools, they are able to self-certify if they serve more than 35,000 students and or more than 45 public schools. So Minneapolis, for example, they hit that criteria. They serve more than 35,000 students, which is really exciting. This is a great opportunity to make this prioritization all the more inclusive. And then the rest are still the same. So this is, again, kind of to just go over super fast how I talked about in the 2022 rebate program. Minnesota only actually put in about 30 applications, which does seem like a lot. And this only is going over the priority school districts. There's over 300 school districts in Minnesota. So when you see that number 30, we have a lot of work to do. And there are, out of that 300, there's 214 prioritized school districts in Minnesota, and only 4 prioritized school districts were selected. And additionally, so to unfortunately cut that number down even more, there were some school districts that were selected in Minnesota that decided to not take the money. So all of this to say is it's a fantastic opportunity for Minnesota to have the biggest comeback of all of the states for the rebate program in 2023. So again, who all is able to apply? State and local government entities, public charter school districts can apply, Indian tribes, tribal organizations, or tribal controlled schools can apply, nonprofit school transportation associations, and then eligible contractors. So that's OEMs, dealers, private school bus fleets, etc. And this last part's really important because there are a lot of school districts that they don't own their buses, and they're done through a private school bus fleet or another third party. And so that partnership is really important. These are also additionally a few new forms that if your school district has applied last year, these did not exist last year, all of these forms are made to make sure that the communication between all parties is secure and fulfilled during this application process. So let's say, like I had mentioned before, if your school district doesn't own your buses and the busing company wants to apply, then they have to fill out a school board awareness certification. So that means that the school board is aware that either that the district or the busing company is applying for these buses, and it has to be done so in writing. Otherwise, if let's say the school board wants to do this, they need to make sure that there's a school district approval certification, or also if contractors would like to be applying on behalf of the school district has to know. So then this would be a form that you would have to have filled out. And then the final one is applicants applying for zero emission school buses. That means that they have to loop in their utility. But all 3 of these sort of stakeholders, the school board, school district, and utility, all of these partnerships are very important. And the other speakers that we'll have tonight will definitely kind of be able to attest and support that. Finally, too, these are the what is covered in the rebate program. So what they like to call it is behind the meter. So that starts with the electric meter, goes to the electric panel, the charging stations, the bus, and then the battery storage systems. What is not covered within this rebate program is what they call front of the meter. So that means the utility distribution network and the transformer. So those 2 things are not able to be funded through this program, but everything else can be. And then also additionally, I had mentioned before that the rebate program is available on the EPA's website. And this is kind of what that web page looks like. If you're more of a visual learner like I am, this is what you'll look for, the yellow box here. And then finally, this is just my last little place, is that, remember, there is $500 million on the line for the EPA's 2023 rebate program. And the EPA actually stated that they will be giving 60% of these funds to priority school districts, so what I had identified before. However, they will be allocating up to the remaining 40% of the funds to all of the other school districts / busing companies that apply. But this is just up to. So in theory, it's a great win for Minnesota because that means everyone has a shot of getting a rebate this year. Everyone has a chance of being selected, but the EPA will only use up to 40% if they get that 40% of applications in the past, school districts have really been deterred away from, if they're not a priority school district, they're like, what's the point? Now we have an opportunity, but it's really crucial again that we get as many Minnesota school districts into that lottery as possible, so then as many of our students here within our state are able to breathe and have access to clean air. So anyway, that was my whole spiel. I would love to take any questions at the end because I would love to pass it on to our next fantastic speaker, which is Joshua.
Thank you very much, Sonita. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. I should say at the start I have four little kids, and this is the post-dinner portion of the evening, so hopefully not a lot of background noise, but just to say that up front, I joke with my colleagues, I'm going to need a school bus for personal use pretty soon here. So Nita asked me to speak a little bit about Red Lake's experience. So they were fortunate to win an EPA rebate in the first round, and just kind of talking through how they're going about implementing their award. And to do that, I'll just give a quick overview of Highland as we are partnering with them and supporting them. We could go to the next slide, please. So just very briefly, Highland, we are an electrification as a service company. And so what that means is we come alongside school districts or their third-party bus operators, and we manage the whole electrification process, so from start to finish. And we partner with them to really overcome the high upfront costs and really help them overcome the risk associated with adopting a new technology. We could go to the next slide, please. Just very briefly, this map shows where our projects are across North America. Two things I wanted to point out briefly is firstly, we're very fortunate to have driven over 1 million miles using electric school buses across North America. And I say that because hopefully it's an encouragement to school districts that are just starting to explore this, that it is possible. The technology is ready. Doesn't mean there aren't challenges along the way, but electric school buses are here and they're ready to transport students. The other thing I like to highlight is these yellow bubbles across North America. They represent a really diverse set of communities. So we have urban projects in metro cities. We have suburban projects like in Dearborn, Michigan. And we also have rural communities like Red Lake. So we feel very passionately that every type of community can and should be able to access the benefits of electric school buses. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here. We could go to the next slide. Just briefly, these buckets here, they kind of illustrate, what are the key facets of electrifying a fleet. And so Highland, as a partner with the school district, we can help through all these processes. So understanding what a community values and helping them apply to grants that are relevant to them through to planning the whole project and implementing on behalf of the school district. Lastly, once chargers are installed and buses are on the road, we also help them manage the fleet on a daily basis. We could go to the next slide. Just another visual which kind of demonstrates Highland, and really we are a public-private partnership model. So we seek to do things that a school district might not be able to do on their own and really leave them to do what they do best, which is getting children to and from school safely. And we do this in a way that helps them not only achieve cost parity with diesel buses, but really actually create savings for them. So a couple of things that we do is oftentimes we own the bus on our balance sheet. And as a private company, that enables us to depreciate the vehicles and get tax benefits that maybe a public institution like a school district would not be able to get on their own. And that enables us to then generate savings, which we pass along to the school district. We do a few other things like bulk purchasing, as we're buying buses across the country, whereas a school district might be buying 2 to 10 buses a year. We're able to work with manufacturers on a larger scale, and really with the goal of dropping costs for everyone involved. And at the end of the day, it really is a performance-based model. So if the bus isn't working or the charger's not working on any given day, Highland, we cover the cost to make sure those students still get to and from school. So really just trying to give the school district some backup as they try this new technology. We could go to the next slide, please. Now getting to the exciting part, talking about Red Lake, we can move on to the next one. So Red Lake, a school district in northern Minnesota and a tribal nation is very committed to sustainability. So they're doing a lot of sustainability initiatives, and they kind of had the foresight to think about electric school buses. So they threw their name in the hat in the first rebate round. They applied for 2 buses, and really with the goal of testing this technology and really trying to develop a long-term plan on how they can move all 30 of those buses eventually to electric. But they're fortunate to win the award. And as they went out to RFP to buy buses and chargers, Highland, we were fortunate enough to win that, and we're now partnering with them. They have seen some challenges being a rural community. Of course, this is a new technology, so we're very excited to be working with them to help them with a smooth implementation. We could go to the next slide. This just gives a quick flavor for the timeline that they were working on. So they applied to the program in summer of 2022. A few months later, they were notified of their award. And like any school district, they then go out for an RFP process because purchases of this magnitude almost always go through a school board vote. And then when they did that, they elected to work with Highland. And then from that point, we talk them through, the type of buses they wanted to order, the type of chargers that they were looking to procure, and construction, due to break ground over the summer. And by next school year, the buses will be up and running and ready to go. Just very briefly, some of the lessons that they learned through the process was there, as Sunita mentioned, there's a sam.gov account that's required for applying to the EPA program. So school districts really should check in on their registration for that, make sure it's updated, because that is the portal and the gateway to applying. Red Lake, because this was a new process for them, there were times where they wanted to take their time and be thorough as they plan. So, they did ask EPA for extensions a couple times as far as purchase order deadlines and things like that. And thankfully, the EPA was very amenable to that. They do want school districts to create sustainable, long-lasting plans. So they were able to do that for them. We also learned, it's very important to talk to your local utility early on, really understand what the electricity and power needs are for that site, and really bring them into the planning process early on. One last interesting lesson was because it is a remote community, they realized that the local dealer that they typically work with was quite far. So we actually, in order to make sure they had help on hand for the high voltage work for the buses, we found a vendor, a Cummins dealership that was actually closer than their bus dealership. So we've created a partnership with a Cummins facility. I believe it's in North Dakota, but it's close enough where they can get to them if they do have any urgent needs. So it's just trying to be creative as we adopt this new technology. With that, we could go to the next one, but I think I definitely want to give time for Douglas and Dan. So with that, we'll kind of move it on to these gentlemen here. But thanks again for taking the time to listen about Red Lake.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joshua. And yeah, if anyone has questions for him, we'll have a Q&A part at the end. But yeah, with that, I will pass it over to Douglas.
Hey, thank you. My name is Douglas Francis. I live in Gaylord, Michigan. I retired a year ago, this last June 30th in Gaylord Community Schools. I had 39.65 years in and ended up as the head mechanic, associate transportation director for Gaylord Schools. If you look at Michigan, look at your right hand, Gaylord, Michigan is right here, your middle finger, between the first and second joint of your finger. So everybody knows where Gaylord, Michigan is. Our district is about 260 square miles. And we have a temperature range of basically from 100 to minus 45 below zero. We came together as a group through the Michigan Association for Pupil Transportation and started the pilot program, which started back in 2016. We had, as a group, many meetings to decide, what brand vehicle we wanted. And at that time, there were only three electric buses that were available to be purchased. We met with charging companies and the power companies, and we had to work with 3 different power companies because our districts were all across Michigan. The only concern that our school board had when we were talking about buying electric buses was would they be warm enough? And they absolutely were warm enough for our temperature range in northern Michigan. Gaylord electric buses were the first to be used for Michigan State Police school bus inspection. They were delivered to Michigan in December 2nd of 2019, where most of the school bus inspectors from the Michigan State Police were there to analyze and tear this electric school bus apart. And they all could see that this vehicle was a real vehicle. We only had to make one small change to the inspection program for the safety purposes of the electric school buses. Again, Gaylord was the first district in Michigan to receive electric school buses, and that was December 2nd of 2019. And we put them on the road right after Christmas break, which was like January 2nd of 2020. We chose Lion buses because of the basic construction of the vehicle, of our environment that we have, salt, the products we put on the road, the placement of the electric motor truss is very important. It was tucked up between the frame rails in front of the rear axle. There was a small learning curve for the drivers. We had the manufacturer come in and give all the drivers a prep of how to drive them. The biggest thing was the regen system. When you take your foot off the gas pedal, the vehicle slows you down and regens the batteries, and really it makes the driver a better driver. You can't, it makes you less aggressive as a driver. Heat has never been a problem for our area, being as low as minus 21 below zero. We've actually had to turn the heaters off. Many districts in Michigan already have diesel-fired auxiliary heaters on our buses, and our vehicles do have diesel-fired auxiliary heaters, and we use roughly 25 gallons of fuel a month to keep our buses warm, or basically 5 quarts of fuel per day. And currently, there are 2 brands of electric buses that do offer a diesel-fired heater. Fully electric heaters do work in cold weather, but you do suffer a range loss of 30 to 40 miles, depending on temperature and so forth. Please, next slide, please. This last August, I participated in a 4-day college class. It was a class put on by Anna, a PhD professor from the University of Michigan, Electrical Engineering Department. 30 of us Zoomed in the meeting, and there were probably 30 people that were live, and they were trying to build curriculums for college kids, high school kids, for teaching electrification of vehicles. They were all looking for a baseline. Where do we start? What do we teach? Well, one couple things we did learn: electric school buses are three times more efficient than diesel, and even 2 times more efficient with a diesel-fired heater. I continually talk with people across the nation about electric buses, all the way from Maine all the way down to California. I've participated in the State of Washington webinar and others. I participated in SDN National Conference in Reno, Nevada in 2022. And it's interesting talking to people, answering questions and helping people. Every once in a while we hear about vehicle to grid or vehicle to building. And that this isn't necessarily right for everybody. Everybody's situation is different depending on how many miles a day you drive your vehicles, or temperature and so forth. And it's important to remember that batteries do have a life cycle with an 8-year warranty and a 4,000 recharge life cycle. There was, through the University of Michigan, there's been great discussion about recycling batteries or repurposing batteries. And word on the street is that Europe is going to get into recycling batteries. So batteries will have a full life cycle. Next, please. This was put together by the University of Michigan, and it says 30% less labor needed for EV manufacturing. And you can see there's several different articles here that they're basically all saying that requires 30% less labor in building electric vehicles. So it kind of puts in perspective why the UAW had some concerns with their last contract negotiations, but they do require 30% less labor to build these vehicles. Next, please. Another slide from University of Michigan. Can materials be domestically sourced? Well, we only actually have one mine in Idaho that we harvest cobalt to build these batteries. Most of the product comes through China or from China directly. And it does take an average of 16 years through the permit process to open up any kind of mines in this country. And most of the minerals that we need today are Native American properties. So we do have some future challenges if this, as we continue through this process. So wrapping things up, if you would imagine that we are basically at the stage of the bag cell phone back in late 80s, 1990. These vehicles all moved on the road, but there are continual changes and there will be many changes in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug. That was a wonderful analogy to leave us with. Yeah, again, just like with the two previous presentations, feel free, if you have a question now, throw it in the chat. Otherwise, we will have a designated time at the end to kind of go through questions. But now I will pass it to Dr. Trujano to wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Dan Trujano. I'm a retired family physician, currently a professor of healthcare economics and healthcare finance at the University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas. And I do a lot of volunteer advocacy on climate and health, and I'm on the board of directors for Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. And I have been studying and organizing around electric school buses, I think, for over 3 years now. Alongside our folks from Highland and Michigan, participate regularly in the EPA Region 5 calls and webinars. And I am just so grateful for both Doug and Joshua to join us here tonight on a Minnesota call, because you guys have just done fantastic work. I mean, Doug to help lead Gaylord's first school buses for Michigan way back in 2019, and Joshua, I think it's just amazing how prevalent electric school buses are, and just with Highland having 1 million miles of experience and knowing that these things are feasible across different school districts across the country. I'm just hoping that we can get more Minnesota schools to apply for these things. And I put together this data based on the first round of rebates, and it's just Michigan has just really been a champion of this. So Doug, really appreciate you being here and sharing your experience with Minnesota. This looks almost exactly like the Big Ten football standings, with Michigan being number 1 and Minnesota going to the Bulls, but not quite as high as Michigan is in the standings. But hopefully we will move up both in football and in electric school bus adoption in the upcoming years. To go to the next slide, Sunita. I want to take this from a little bit different angle, and it is so great to hear from Doug and Joshua that these school buses can operate even in cold climates and in the upper Michigan and across the country, and they can be financially feasible, if not beneficial for school districts. And I'm sure all that depends on cost of electricity, how much you can get in rebates or funding, but to have so many schools across the country find and look at this and say, we will begin to do this, and it makes both business sense and we can operate these in all sorts of school districts with the routes and the climate that are in those school districts. So. But I'll tell you, I'm gonna shift this conversation a little bit, because for me as a physician and an advocate on climate and health, we also know that moving to zero emission electric school buses has so many other benefits for the students they serve. When I first heard about this a few years ago, I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know much about the technology I didn't really studied air pollution a lot. But when I began to look at the research behind this, it became really clear to me that if we can get zero emission buses, kids are going to do better, both academically and from a health standpoint, and communities are going to do better, and the climate's going to do better because of the decreased climate pollution from electric school buses compared to fossil fuel burning buses. There are a couple of really credible studies, large scale randomized studies. When you expose kids to less school bus diesel emission, you actually see um, significantly better academic performance and significantly better health. And not only does the EPA have the $5 billion program, last year we were able to testify to get a Minnesota bill passed that provides an additional $13 million of funding just for Minnesota schools. And that should be coming out in through the Department of Commerce, hopefully this not too far future this year. And we, my wife and I, Paula, and our friend Brooke Roper and her son CJ were able to testify at the House this year in favor of that bill that got passed. And Brooke's story, I think, is really compelling because her son CJ, who's now in first grade, has asthma. He's been hospitalized with asthma, and she is worried about him riding a school bus because last year in kindergarten he was riding a school bus on a field trip, and he came back and his breathing just was not right. She was really fearful. Fortunately, after getting off the bus, he recovered, didn't need to be hospitalized, but she is just worried about him on those buses now that he's in first grade. And the research is quite clear. Those studies show that kids that are exposed to less diesel emissions on school buses actually have better lung function tests. They have better aerobic capacity testing, and they have less school absenteeism by about 8% in those randomized trials. And their academic test scores improve. And I think one article said the amount of improvement is like taking some of those kids who are with a first-year teacher and giving that teacher 5 extra years of experience in terms of the amount of English language testing score improvement that was in that big study in Georgia. So if you go to the next slide, Sunita. Thanks. So here are the references to those studies on the academic and health impacts, but also there is significant climate impact. Each school bus, diesel school bus, produces like 90 to 100 tons of carbon over its lifetime. And once we get to an all-electric fleet across the US, that's 5.3 million tons of carbon pollution that are eliminated from the atmosphere every year. So it's a significant impact. And then the economic impacts, particularly if schools get funding for these buses. The buses upfront costs are significantly higher, but priority schools can get almost all of that bus paid for if they get a rebate and qualify for some IRS credits. And non-priority schools get about half of the bus paid for. And compared to a fossil fuel bus, electric buses save about $4,000 to $11,000, according to the webinars I was on with Michigan, who have a lot of experience with it. $4,000 to $11,000 per year in fuel and maintenance cost. And then the vehicle to grid that Doug was talking about, where you can actually use those bus batteries during peak energy demand when they turn on fossil fuel peaker plants to meet the people turning on their air conditioners when they get home from work. That's the highest cost, most carbon intensive energy we use. And in Beverly, Massachusetts, they actually partner with the utility out there. They have several buses. They are, in the last 2 summers, they studied this. They are set up with that vehicle to grid using those bus batteries as virtual power plants. They are selling back nearly $12,000 of energy back to the utility per bus per summer. So it's another source of potential cost offset or revenue when you have an electric school bus. And that's not theoretical. That's happening in Massachusetts and out I think a couple other states, New York and New Jersey. And I know Excel on the docket, they are discussing this at the PUC here in Minnesota. They're likely going to begin to pilot that here in the upcoming years. Excel is going to help purchase some buses to do so. So there's academic, health, climate, and economic impacts. And I know I have some questions for those other two who just have so much experience in getting these buses operating, but I'll turn it back to Sunita to see if there's others online that may have some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now, just for a little bit. I see there are a few questions in the chat already. So I will first pause for a second to invite anybody to come off mic to ask your question. If it's to a specific individual, if you don't mind just addressing them so they know whether it's targeted towards the stuff they covered. Otherwise, I will go over the questions from the chat. But does anyone want to come off mic now and have any questions?
Yeah, I did have it in the chat. This is Kathy Iverson. And Doug, I just wondered how would you, from your experience, how would you advise a school district that's really reluctant to apply for the electric school bus rebate? Is there anything that just strikes you that would be compelling for them to apply?
Well, it was a positive experience for us. And our superintendent was really on board with it. So you really have to have your transportation person or, administrator and superintendent involved in it. The transporting of the students themselves made a big difference. The quietness in the vehicle, the kids were not as loud. They seemed to be more settled. And obviously the fumes, they didn't breathe any fumes. I just think it's a good thing all the way around for kids. It is definitely cleaner. You're not breathing the fumes. When the windows are down, you're not breathing the fumes. Quieter. Student management, that really is a big thing. Student management, the students are much, much quieter. And you can actually, if you're driving the vehicle, and I've had the privilege of driving one for several weeks as we were short on drivers right after COVID, you can literally talk to the kids just like you and I are talking. It's that quiet when the heaters are off. It's just unbelievable how quiet they are. And it really affects the total atmosphere of the bus for the students.
Well, that's just wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. That's just great.
Yeah, I had a similar question too. Doug. It sounds like in Gaylord, the superintendent was really on board with this. And yeah.
He really was. I started attending our groups with, and I've been a member of Michigan Association of People Transportation. I was on the board for 10 years, but I was a member for probably 30 years. And I started attending our group meetings and then kind of had to pull back because our superintendent wasn't sure he wanted to do this. Well, what I found out later was he wanted us to do it on our own, is what he wanted us to do. And then, then I got back into the group, but I think it was better as a group, as a pilot program, because we all asked some different questions. We come from a different perspective. Our environments are different. I've got hills, Camelback Hills in my district, and Lower Michigan's, most of our electric buses were in Lower Michigan, and it's flatland down there. So, and our temperatures were colder, and of course, we have snow to deal with, and we've never had an issue with traction. We've never had an issue with tire slippage from regen. It was just all a good experience as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Joshua, I'm curious too, because you have so many school districts. Same kind of question. Who leads the charge in those schools? Do you find it like the administration says, yeah, we're going to do this, or is it transportation directors that say, hey, wow, this is really cool, we should really look at this, and they lead the charge? Or is it a school board member or school boards? Or is it more community that says, hey, we want these things in our community?
Yeah, I think, Dan, it's a great question. I think the simple answer is yes. But what I mean by that is every project that we have, they're only successful when every layer of the community is bought into it and feels like they have some ownership in it. And that's everything starting with families and even local community members through to the transportation department, as Doug knows, plays a critical role. A lot of time, the school administrators, superintendent and business official, they tend to be the ones that see the numbers and how much these electric vehicles can save a district. And then ultimately the school board, they always vote on a project of this magnitude. And so we've also seen it is important to get local civic leaders and municipal leaders on board, even if they're not buying buses. I think, say, if a mayor or a local council member is supportive, that gives the school board assurance that they could try this new technology. So don't mean to be cheeky, but yeah, to your answer, really, you need the whole community to come together and support. We have seen oftentimes there's kind of one champion that gets everyone involved, but everyone does need to be involved.
And to build on what Joshua has said, the city of Gaylord, Michigan, has 4 chargers, 1 block off of Main Street. We're one of the first, cities in Michigan that have chargers, public chargers. So it really was a community thing.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing. I see Lex, your hand is up as well. And guys, Lex is very cool. They work with the Department of Commerce, so kind of celebrity spotting. Anyway, take it away.
Thank you, Sunita. I don't directly have a question. I just want to first thank Sunita, MN350, and Highland, everybody who's EPA, of course, and everybody who's organizing these efforts. I want to say that as a member of the Department of Commerce, we are actively working on a electric school bus grant to go separate and sort of on top of the rebates. So I just want to say that the Department of Commerce, the Minnesota State, the State Energy Office is full steam ahead with this. We want Minnesota to have electric school buses. We want the kids to be safer, because it goes beyond, oh, we are the energy office. We think about kilowatt hours and things like that. We are also thinking about equitable access to these kinds of technologies. And if our presence here, if our help, if our just us saying, hello, we are here and we approve of this message, help you or any other school district say, hey, you know what, maybe if the state and everybody says, yes, maybe we want to move on, please reach out to us. We can help too. And we're all in on it.
That was such a heartfelt message. Thank you so much, Lex. That's fantastic. And yeah, they're doing amazing work, and really, really excited to see the Department of Commerce program take off. I feel like even in the last week, I've read so many articles, including this program. It's the $13 million, which is really exciting. And two, it's kind of already getting looped into what Dan was talking about with Excel's project. How can the department and this project complement each other? And there's just a lot of really exciting seeds we seem to be planting. So now it's just kind of like, all right, we got to get some water in there, and then we're set to go. But back to the questions. I see that another one is in the chat. Okay, so this question is, how much fuel is needed again for heating buses over the winter? I think this is for Doug. Did you say 5 quarts or was it per bus?
I would say, so we use 25 gallons of fuel per month. And, we were, being part of the pilot program, we worked directly with University of Michigan, and they actually could track all of our buses. If you picture a big map of Michigan, when all the buses are moving in the morning or afternoon, they actually track all of our buses through satellite. So, and part of it was, fuel usage just for the heater. And we average 25 gallons of fuel per month. So let's put that in perspective. If you're, the average school bus in Michigan travels 70 miles a day, and that's 7 miles a gallon, which is high. We average 6.95 miles per gallon. So that's 10 gallons of fuel per day just to move the vehicle down the road, or 50 gallons per week, or 200 gallons per month. And I'm talking 25 gallons per month just to heat the vehicle, not move it down the road. And there's a large percentage of our school bus fleets in Michigan that use diesel engines, and they use a diesel fired auxiliary heater. So we got a double whammy there of fumes. So if we use diesel fuels just strictly for heating the vehicle, that's between an 85 and 90% reduction in fossil fuels alone. I would think if we don't use any of them, I mean, that is a significant reduction in fuel usage.
And is that just for one bus, or is that for
Yes, 25 gallons a month per bus.
25 gallons a month per bus? Okay, thank you.
And that's just in the winter, Doug, or is that on
Yes,
average throughout the
winter months only? Yeah, summer
Okay,
it doesn't
so-
matter. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
yes. They did. University did some really good research on these electric vehicles, and they gave a darn good 4-day presentation. I learned an awful lot about them. For example, battery safety, and I participated in national meetings with all the manufacturers, and I finally asked a question one day, what about battery safety? We never heard about battery safety. Well, one manufacturer said, well, we build our batteries strong enough to withstand the manhole explosion in New York City. The other manufacturers, we build our batteries to withstand a bullet, a gun shot at one in California. So they are really aware of battery safety. And in the event there is a battery fire, because we're hearing a little conversation about battery fires, they don't just explode in the flames. You have lots of warning. They have the alarms on the vehicles and so forth that, to notify the driver there's battery temperature. And they smolder for a long time before they take off if there's a fire.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, Dan, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I think you both talked about finances some, and I am really curious. Doug, I don't know if Gaylord is where you got the funding to help with the cost of the school buses. Was that through the EPA, or was that through
that was the Volkswagen
or...
Mitigation Fund.
Okay.
And
how much did they give you per bus, or how much did it end up covering of the bus?
Our buses were, what did I say? They were $375,000 each, I believe they were. And our Chargers were $2,750 each. And our power company, you really want to work with your power company, our power company, Consumers Power of Michigan, they gave us $5,000 per charger. So between the chargers and the installation, it was roughly $12,500, and the Consumers Energy gave us $10,000.
Oh, okay.
So
how much did you have
to
end up paying for the bus?
All said and done, we spent $105,000 per bus, which is about what we spent on a normal school bus.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joshua, too, I know you mentioned you sort of Highland can take some of the risk and depreciate some of the costs. And just mostly curious because I know the priority districts like Gaylord, I don't know if they're priority in the remote rural or not, but some of the remote rural communities in Minnesota, some of the poverty schools here in Minnesota, including Minneapolis with Title I schools in St. Paul. I think Rochester is large enough that they can self-certify for Title I schools. They can get almost near full funding, is my understanding. If they get these school bus rebates and IRS rebates, and so it seems to make sense to me if they save money and you're getting a lot of funding, the economics should work out. But if you're not a priority school, you only get half the amount of funding. Can you just share a little bit of how the schools are calculating the economics? Because I think what we're hearing when we go to schools, they cost too much. They cost too much. We're not going to do it yet. They cost too much. And I don't know if people realize, there's a lot of funding up there that will help offset that cost.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's why I really value what, this webinar that Sanita's putting on, because now is the moment. Frankly, these EPA funds are unprecedented. It's fantastic that Minnesota has this state fund because grants really are an important piece of the puzzle for the vast majority of school districts. Most times, we encourage school districts. There's never such thing as a free bus. Even to Douglas's example, the school district put forward some money. Luckily, that's the type of money they had already. But some of the other costs that come into play would be the infrastructure upgrades, the time that it takes to train staff and things like that. So oftentimes the grants can be the make or break still for these school districts. So that's why we do encourage people to apply. But just as an example, maybe not to harp on the Michigan-Minnesota rivalry, but one of the school districts we work with is Dearborn, Michigan. So they did win an EPA grant for 18 buses, which is fantastic. That's a lot of money. But they quickly realized that in order to get enough power to their depot, there's still upgrades that were required. And so in order to manage those costs, they went out to bid and did decide to work with Highland. And so we were able to then structure the program in a way that they only start paying once the buses are on the road. And so there's no upfront cost required. So that did appeal to a school district like Dearborn that, they have a lot going on, don't necessarily have time for their transportation staff to order chargers and order electric buses. So they did see the value in that.
I've actually had the privilege of speaking at Dearborn Public Schools.
Did you?
A year or so ago about that when they were talking about doing this.
That's fantastic. So I have to thank you, Doug, for encouraging them to apply.
So I may have misspoke. $342,000 is what we got per bus. So we ended up paying $105,000 per bus. And I think you have to think of it like this. When diesel fuel was $2.50 a gallon for us, and our current electric rate, we were paying 27 cents a mile for electricity and 26 cents a mile for diesel fuel. But you're not talking about the service of the vehicle, other transmission issues, emission control devices that drive everybody crazy. So when you're buying these vehicles, you're basically front loading your purchase. The annual maintenance of these vehicles is just, you check the air in the tires and grease 12 grease fittings on the vehicle. If you have a diesel fired heater, you service it annually. But I mean, there's nothing like the vehicle with the transmission and alternator and all that, starter and all that. It's a whole different concept. So you're basically front loading the vehicle, and then it, hopefully you shouldn't have any problem to the life cycle of the vehicle.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really do hate to cut this conversation off, but I want to respect everybody's time. So a huge thank you to everyone who came tonight. And again, a massive thank you to Joshua, Dan, Douglas, and Lex, everybody for coming on and kind of speaking from, it's so cool with this kind of electric school bus world. We get to bring so many different people together, all on an amazing issue. So this is just a few next steps really fast. A recording will be sent out to all attendees. So feel free to send this to whoever you'd like. I definitely will be listening back to all of the wonderful numbers that Doug was able to provide us in this one. I think that was super useful. If you have any questions or interest in engaging with your own school district, please email anyone who is on camera. I know that there was a question about the studies that Dan had referenced. So whoever that was, I'll send the emails and you can locate them that way. And then again, finally, Minnesota students deserve to breathe clean air. So let's get those applications in by January 31st. So with that, I will close everything off. But thank you everybody so much for coming on, and I will be sending a recording out soon. Okay. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.